Today, I want to share an amazing story about how English helped me reach my dream, discover my passion, and achieve success. If you also have big goals, maybe you want to be a doctor, engineer, lawyer, business owner, or something else important, then English is a skill you really need. There's no doubt about it. Around 1.5 billion people speak English, and it is the language used for travel, global business, and most of the internet. Without English, you may lose many opportunities, such as getting a better job, meeting friends from different countries, or enjoying books and movies in their original form. But don't worry, you can start learning today and join this international community. If I learned English and reached my dream, you can do it too. My name is Sophia, and I am from Brazil. I was born in a small Brazilian town. My family wasn't rich or poor. We were somewhere in the middle. We had enough for daily life, but not for anything extra. My parents both worked hard. My father drove a taxi, and my mother worked as a school teacher. They always told me that education was the most important key to success. Since childhood, I had only one goal: to become a doctor. There is one day I will never forget. I was 10 years old when my younger brother got very sick. His fever was extremely high, and we were all frightened. My parents were crying. Then a doctor came into the room. He looked calm, confident, and very kind. He smiled and said that he would take care of my brother. I watched him work carefully and professionally. He checked my brother, gave him medicine, and spoke with knowledge and gentleness. After a few hours, my brother's fever went down, and he was safe. At that moment, I thought, one day I will be a doctor too. I want to save lives like he does. But as I got older, I discovered something difficult. To become a doctor, English was absolutely necessary. Almost all medical books are written in English. Medical research is also in English. Even in Brazil, doctors must understand English to study, communicate, and work well. And my English was terrible. In my public school, we learned very little English. I only knew simple words like hello and how are you. When I looked at a complete English sentence, I felt completely lost. I remember one day in class, my English teacher asked me to read a sentence. I looked at the page, and the words didn't make sense at all. I couldn't read them, and I couldn't understand anything. I whispered, "I don't know," and some students laughed. After school, I went home feeling hopeless. I sat alone and thought, how can I become a doctor if I can't read even a simple English sentence? I felt like giving up. But then something happened that changed everything. One evening, my father came home tired and sat beside me. He asked why I looked so sad all the time. I told him about my dream and how my poor English was stopping me. He was silent for a long moment, and then he said, "If English is a problem, then learn English. Go somewhere where everyone speaks it." I was shocked. We didn't have much money, but he smiled and said, "We don't have a lot, but we have enough. Your dream matters." So we talked as a family about the best place for me to learn English. We chose Canada. Everyone speaks English there. The education system is excellent. The people are friendly, and it was cheaper than studying in the U.S. or UK. It wasn't an easy choice. My parents used almost all their savings to pay for my flight, my English classes, and the first months of living there. Before I left, my mother held my hand and said, "We are giving you everything we have. Promise you won't give up." I promised with tears in my eyes. And then, with only one suitcase and a huge dream, I flew to Canada. When I arrived in Toronto, I felt like I had landed on another planet. The weather was freezing, completely different from warm Brazil. The food felt strange, and I missed my mother's cooking. People were kind, but they spoke incredibly fast. At the airport, a man asked if I needed a taxi. I panicked. I didn't understand him at all. I just smiled and said yes. When he asked where I needed to go, My mind went blank, and I only showed him the address on my phone. That night in my small rented room, I cried. I didn't know how I was going to survive if I couldn't understand anything. The next morning, I went to my English language school. The teacher welcomed everyone with a warm smile and asked each student to introduce themselves. When my turn arrived, I stood up, shaking. I said, "My name's Sophia. I'm from Brazil." I wanted to say more, but my mind went completely empty. I sat down feeling embarrassed, especially when I noticed a few students laughing quietly. That night, I made a decision. No matter how difficult it was, and no matter how many mistakes I made, I would learn English. That moment was the real beginning of my language journey. The first weeks in Canada felt like entering a completely different world. Everything was exciting, but also very frightening. Back in Brazil, I understood everything around me. Here, I felt like a small child learning how to speak again. Before talking about how my English improved, I want to share some strange things I noticed in Canada. The first surprising thing was that students did not wear uniforms. In Brazil, every school has uniforms, but in Canada, children wore whatever they wanted. Some even came to school wearing pajamas, and nobody cared. Another cultural difference was personal space. In my country, we hug, kiss on the cheek, and stand close when we talk. In Canada, people preferred more distance. If you hugged someone without asking, they would probably feel uncomfortable. The weather was another shock. In Canada, it could change in seconds. One minute the sun was shining, and the next minute it was raining or snowing. Something else that amazed me was the self-checkout machines in supermarkets. In many stores, there was no cashier. People scanned and paid for their own groceries. Also, Canadians said sorry for almost everything. Even if you stepped on someone's foot, they would be the one to apologize. I thought that was very funny. The food portions were huge. One time I ordered a small meal in a restaurant, and it looked like enough food for 3 people. But the biggest surprise of all was the English that people used. It was so fast, full of slang and expressions I had never seen in my school textbooks. Instead of saying, "Do you want to get a coffee?" people said things like, "Want to grab a coffee?" I often felt as if I had never studied English before. In my second day of class, the teacher gave us a short writing task. I felt confident at first, but when she returned my paper, it was covered in corrections. She explained that my writing was understandable, but my sentences sounded strange because I was thinking in Portuguese and translating word by word. Speaking was even more difficult. When the teacher asked questions, I knew the answer in my head, but when I tried to speak, nothing came out. I often felt like crying. I wondered if I would ever be able to speak English fluently. But I refused to stay weak in English because I knew my dream depended on it. If I didn't improve, I would never become a doctor. So I created a plan to change the situation. The first part of my plan was something I called a headphone trick. I was very shy and afraid of speaking, so I decided to pretend I was talking on the phone while walking around the city. With headphones on, I described everything I saw. I am walking on the street. The sky is blue. That woman is wearing a red coat. Now I'm entering a cafe. This helped me practice without feeling embarrassed. The second part of my plan was to learn 3 new English words every day and use them in sentences immediately. The third part was the no subtitles rule. At first, I watched movies in English with subtitles, but I realized I was reading instead of listening, so I turned the subtitles off. It was very difficult at first, but slowly I began to recognize more and more words and phrases. One day, I went to a cafe and decided that I had to speak to someone in English. The barista asked, "Hey, what can I get you today?" My heart was pounding, but I answered, "I would like a cappuccino, please." When she asked, "Almond milk or regular?" I understood everything. I replied quickly, "Regular milk, please." When I took my coffee and said, "You too," after she wished me a nice day, I felt like I had won a gold medal. That small conversation made me realize something important. English fluency is not about being perfect. It is about being confident. From the cost of living in Canada to the moment she starts thinking in English, learning English was one challenge. But living in Canada was another difficult battle. Life there is expensive, and I had to calculate every dollar. Each month, I spent around $800 on rent for a small room, which I share with a roommate, so we could save money. Groceries cost me about $250 a month, and I learned to cook at home because eating out was too expensive. My transportation pass cost $120, and my phone bill was about $50. On top of that, my English classes were $500 every month. To survive, I worked part-time in a small cafe. My days were exhausting. I woke up at 6 in the morning, went to school, worked my shift, and then studied at night. I miss my family deeply, but I couldn't forget the sacrifices my parents made for me. I felt I had no right to give up. The biggest breakthrough happened when I finally stopped translating everything in my head. At the beginning, my brain always did the same process. I heard English translated into Portuguese, thought my answer in Portuguese, and then translated it back into English. It took so long and made speaking extremely difficult. But after about 4 months of constant exposure to the language, something incredible happened. One day at the grocery store, the cashier asked me, "Do you need a bag?" And without thinking, I said, "No, I have one, thanks." I didn't translate anything. The answer just came out naturally. For the first time, I realized I was starting to think in English. If you are having a hard time learning English, I want to share my advice. First, speak every day, even if you are alone. Try the headphone trick, like I did. Second, stop translating in your head. Start forming your thoughts directly in English. Third, talk to native speakers, even if it scares you. Fourth, surround yourself with English everywhere. Change your phone, your movies, and your music to English. And last, don't be afraid of making mistakes. They are part of the learning process. But the most important thing is to never give up. I will never forget the day when everything changed for me. The day I realized that I could speak English for real. But before I tell you that part, I want to take you deeper into my life in Canada. The challenges, the unusual experiences, and the steps that finally helped me sound like a native speaker. After living in Canada for 6 months, my English had improved a lot. I could understand much more, order food without fear, and talk to my classmates with less difficulty. But there was still one major problem. I was terrified of speaking with native English speakers. They talked very fast and used so much slang that I often felt confused. When I didn't understand something, I felt stupid. Because of that, I avoided conversations. If someone spoke to me, I usually just smiled, said yes, or laughed a little, even if I had no idea what they were talking about. But deep down, I knew that if I wanted to become fluent, I had to face this fear. One morning, I made a brave decision. I walked into my favorite cafe and told myself, "Sophia, today you will have a real conversation with a native speaker. No running away." I stood in line feeling very nervous. Then the girl behind me said, "Ugh, this line is so long, right?" My heart almost stopped, but this was my chance. I took a deep breath and replied, "Yeah, it's really long." She continued talking, saying she came there every morning and it was always like that. I panicked for a moment, not knowing what to say, but instead of overthinking, I simply said, "Oh, really? I just moved here, so I didn't know." She smiled and asked where I was from. Just like that, we started a natural conversation. I didn't translate, I didn't freeze, I just spoke. After that moment, something changed inside me. I realized that I truly could communicate. That small conversation gave me confidence, and that confidence was exactly what I had been missing. From gaining confidence to improving pronunciation, making friends, and dealing with emotional and financial struggles. Once I finally felt more confident, I wanted to take my English to an even higher level. I didn't just want to speak the language. I wanted to sound more natural, almost like a native speaker. So I decided to try something many people find strange, the shadowing method. Whenever I watched a TV show, I paused after a sentence and repeated it exactly like the actor. I copied their tone, speed, rhythm, and emotion. For example, if the actor said, "Oh my God, that's insane," I tried to say it with the same energy and pronunciation. At first it felt awkward, but after a month of doing this every day, my pronunciation improved a lot. I also began keeping a small notebook for all my English mistakes. Every time I said something wrong, I wrote it down and corrected it. One example was, "I am agree with you," which I corrected to "I agree with you." I reviewed this notebook every day, and little by little, I stopped making the same mistakes. This habit helped me grow faster because I became more aware of my weak points. Another big step, and the most difficult one for me, was making Canadian friends. I knew that talking to native speakers was the fastest way to improve, but I was shy and nervous. Still, I pushed myself to try. I joined free events for international students, where people from many countries met to practice English. I also used language exchange apps to find Canadians who wanted to learn Portuguese, so we helped each other. And at my part-time job, I started chatting more with my co-workers instead of staying quiet. The more I talked with local people, the more natural my speaking became. But even though my English was improving, my life wasn't easy. I was constantly tired. Balancing school, working in a cafe, and studying late at night was exhausting. Sometimes I felt lonely because my family lived so far away. I couldn't visit Brazil. The flights were too expensive. My financial situation was terrible. Even after 6 months, I was still struggling with money. One day, I checked my bank account and saw only $5. I sat in my tiny room and cried. I wondered if I had made the wrong choice. Maybe I should return home. But then I remembered why I came. I didn't travel across the world just to fail. I told myself, no, I will make this work. I wiped my tears, stood up, and continued fighting for my dream. I want you to imagine something. Picture yourself waking up in a beautiful apartment, looking at the city skyline, drinking coffee with a smile and thinking, I made it. That is how I feel today. But 5 years earlier, I was a broke student, struggling with English, scared and confused in a foreign country. To enter medical school, I had to pass the IELTS exam, and it terrified me. The reading section was full of long, complicated texts. The speaking part made me feel like I was being judged. The writing task seemed impossible, but I studied every single day. I practiced writing essays, recording myself speaking, and reading difficult medical articles. When exam day arrived, I felt nervous, but I reminded myself, Sophia, you didn't come this far to fail. I took a deep breath and did my best. A week later, my result arrived. I passed. I held the paper in my hands and cried tears of joy. That moment showed me that nothing could stop me if I worked hard enough. Finally reaching the dream, facing new challenges, and becoming a doctor. After passing the IELTS exam, I was finally accepted into medical school. I remember the exact moment I received the email. I was sitting on my bed, exhausted after work, when I saw the message on my phone. Congratulations, you've been admitted to the program. I froze. For a few seconds, I couldn't even breathe. When I opened the email and read the official letter, tears filled my eyes. I called my parents immediately. They cried, I cried, It was one of the happiest moments of my life. But entering medical school didn't mean the fight was over. In many ways, the real battle had just begun. Studying medicine in a foreign language was incredibly difficult. I had to learn complex medical vocabulary and understand advanced scientific texts in English. Sometimes, during lectures, I felt lost because I couldn't follow everything professors said. I spent long nights reading, writing notes, and practicing pronunciation of medical terms like cardiovascular system, neurology, and immunology. While other students slept, I was awake, studying alone in the library. However, all those challenges made me stronger. Slowly, things became easier. After a year, I was speaking and studying more confidently. After 2 years, I was answering questions in class and discussing cases with my classmates. After 3 years, I realized I could express myself almost like a native speaker. My teachers noticed it too. One of them even said, "Sophia, your English has improved so much. You should be proud." During my clinical rotations, I met many patients, including immigrants who couldn't speak English well. I understood their fear because I had lived it myself. I always tried to speak slowly, clearly, and kindly. Some patients told me, "You make me feel safe." Hearing that made all the difficult years worth it. When graduation day came, I wore my white coat, looked in the mirror, and couldn't believe what I saw. The girl who once struggled to say a simple sentence in English was now a doctor. Even today, every morning when I dress for work, I remind myself of the long journey that brought me here. The small room in Canada, the struggles with money, the fear of speaking, the long nights studying, the tears, the stress, and the victories. Now I live in a beautiful apartment with a view of the city, something I used to dream about. When I make my morning coffee, I look out the skyline and say to myself, "You did it. You changed your life." And if you are reading this, I want you to remember one thing. If I could do it, so can you. You don't need to be rich. You don't need to be perfect, and you don't need to know everything. What you need is determination. Even when things feel impossible, don't stop. Keep learning, keep practicing, keep fighting. Your future self will thank you, because one day you will wake up, look in the mirror, and realize that you have become the person you always wanted to be.